Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hello. Good morning.
Hello,
It's
Data Mike.
been a long week, I think. I feel like it's already Thursday.
It is Thursday.
is already
We are
Thursday.
close. You know what's going to blow your mind is apparently it's Thursday and we're close to a long holiday weekend.
True.
Oh, is that this weekend? Okay.
Yeah, like coming in
Fourth of-
hot early next week.
4th of July is on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
which will be interesting.
Okay.
Do you work on Monday and Tuesday, or just have off one or two of those days?
They have instituted summer hours on every other Friday, and rather than have our summer hours on Friday, it's going to be on Monday. So it's like a quick check-in on Monday. So like half day in between.
Nice.
And most folks are taking it off, obviously. So yeah, it'll be nice little break for those of us who manage a lot of people. We use those days to do development because it's quiet. You're not getting hammered with questions or tons of meeting requests and things like that. So yeah, looking forward to it. Should be good week.
Should be good times. All right. Let's jump into some quick things around the internet. Tommy, you found something that's quite interesting here on the Twitters that appeared.
The Twitterverse.
Off the Twitterverse, you can always rely on the Twitterverse. Never disappoints, right? To find some gold nugget worth talking about. So we'll put this in the chat as well. And this comes from, and I will absolutely botch the name. So, but Mimone Dialajo. And I know I italified that.
You italified it, but that's okay.
This goes right off of the cusp of what we were talking about the previous two episodes about the automatic artifacts that are created in a Fabric workspace. If you create a lakehouse,
yes,
automatically there is that data flow, default data flow that's created, and there's actually 4 of them. And according to Manone, it was talking about that default data flow Gen 2 that's created that you have no control over, so to speak, and really you're not really doing anything with. He's looking at his Fabric capacity management, and it was by far and away running well over what looks to be the majority of his CPU processing for this artifact that he has nothing to do with it. So which is concerning. We've talked about this a lot about how great Fabric is, but there's going to be a cost issue with this and our a limitation with your own capacity. And hopefully it's a bug, and I think he's saying that as well, but it's concerning.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily. So I have been running Fabric. One thing I think that's worthy to note here: if you are on a Fabric trial, I didn't know this until a couple days ago. There is a Microsoft Fabric app you can go get from the App Store. So I would
what?
Yeah, there is an apps in the app location, and you should go get the Microsoft Fabric capacity metrics. So if it wasn't good enough that we had at least 3 metrics apps around what's going on in your tenant, here's yet another one. So you now need the old. If you're running old Gen 1 Power BI Premium, you could go get that one. If you need Gen 2, you'll need that as well. So just FYI, there is another capacity metric. I will say it's pretty good. It helps you kind of at least at a glance kind of see what's being used or capacity wise. I have this capacity app basically draws 2 main questions for me, and I'd be curious what you guys think about this as well. My first question is, one, what the heck are some of these assets that are being created, and they're just going to sit there and consume capacity. They're just going to sit there and spin, and if you're turning on a lake house or a data warehouse, it's just going to sit there and eat I don't know, CUs.
Eat CUs.
Yeah.
I guess the thing that's interesting to me is before I jump on the bandwagon of, oh my gosh, like they're charging us all this stuff, and like eventually they won't. I almost wonder if it's the opposite, where they just haven't integrated all the costs into the frontline stuff. right? Like this could very well be the back end cost that is part of what you're going to incur, and they
Yes.
just broken it out into the front side data elements that are visible to you, right? Like they could be sub elements in all of the other like frontline things they do eventually like want to retain and not show you it, whatever, but they would still need to show where those costs have gone. So rather than a separate line item as it is now, which is causing consternation, I almost wonder if it's like technically part of the other pieces. It just needs to get broken out into them.
Yeah, that's a good question.
The word of caution here is I
Yeah.
would not personally assume that cost just goes away. I would 100 probably lean in more towards that cost being part of it. It just needs to get integrated into the pieces you see so that it breaks out the way you think.
This has been, but this is also, I think this also speaks to my gripe around this whole thing anyways. I don't know what's going on. Like, yes, it's in preview, fine. But I have no way of gauging how far along we are in this process. Like, how much am I really spending? It's a preview, fine. But also part of the preview is like, I didn't know how much stuff's costing. So I can say, okay, don't turn this on. That's going to be expensive. Don't turn this one on. This was efficiently run. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with the comment from the standpoint that it's great to kick the tires on the new thing.
Yes.
It would be good to know, but that's significantly different than exploring like real world transitions or how do you use the tool in your ecosystem, because cost is absolutely a factor.
Yes.
Right. So your preview should be part of the testing so that you can come out of this and have the conversation that's going to be had, which is, well, yeah, these offer great capabilities and that's why it's worth the 5% increase, or this is the best thing ever because it's going to save us 10% across our solutions.
I can justify this
thing, right? And like if we can't do that in the preview, I think that's a miss.
Yeah,
because then you're needing R&D budget to go determine whether or not it's a viable replacement for certain aspects of your solution.
Yep. Yes. So
we'll see.
That's my one complaint is the CU kind of being unknown, and my other complaint here is my understanding is Fabric uses OneLake, and OneLake is blob storage to some effect somewhere. It's probably more complex than I'm boiling it down to. I'm making it very simple here, but my understanding is if you're using Fabric and you're storing all these artifacts down into OneLake, all of the OneLake artifacts are counted towards a storage cost that I think goes to you as well. So you don't get all this storage just for free. I think you get a portion of it for free just because it's, part of your Microsoft 365. And if you read the documentation on Microsoft, this is what is interesting. You get 100 terabytes of storage from Microsoft using a Power BI Pro license, which I think is a made up number. Like if you actually stored 100 terabytes of data a month, it would be way more than $10 per user inside your tenant or per capacity. That seems a bit like suspect there at best. So anyways, that's another thing I just don't know how that works. I need to figure that one out before I really can start stepping behind this and saying, yeah, I endorse it. It's ready to go. I feel like there's some more. Yeah, Alex, thanks for correcting me there. Yeah, a premium P1 at the capacity level gets you 100 terabytes of storage, which that's pretty crazy.
That's generous.
That is very generous.
But yeah, hey, how many companies are actually going that high with stuff, right? Like,
I don't know. I would think at some point in time you're.
Well, actually, I'm gonna draw that back.
Maybe
never mind.
Not just storage, right?
Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, like if a P1 is 100 terabytes of storage, that's actually really well. I mean, you get the storage along with it. It's not
correct.
Like you're paying P1 price just for storage. So,
but is someone making 100 terabytes of data flows?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And if that runs for 5 years, maybe it starts getting pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, if you're having a data flow that's continually loading data over and over and over again,
not working. I'll play that after
incrementally refreshing. Gigabytes per day. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're doing something like that. That would be crazy.
And that storage is compute and processing part of that, in a sense, storage kind of like, does it work like RAM, or is it literally just artifacts that sit there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I think it's if data, also data flows. If you make a data flow inside a Power BI workspace, if you don't attach your own storage account, which means I can connect to it with, Azure Storage Explorer, whatever else I want. If I let Microsoft manage that experience for me, they're standing up the storage account, and everything I store in that data flow then goes into Microsoft's bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that I'm like, okay, to me, that's the understanding of that. But that whole 100 terabyte thing has been kind of vague to me in general anyways. Seemed kind of obtuse.
I'm actually really enjoying the one-off like little intro, like, hey, I found this tweet and Fabric in general, because it's like a 15-minute conversation as opposed to, oh, hey, here's the new feature and announcement.
Yikes. Anyways, so keep testing it out. I would say recommend go get the Microsoft Fabric app in your tenant. You should definitely check that out and see if you can install that. I believe the owner of your Fabric capacity needs to be the user of that app. So if you are the owner of the test Fabric, then yes, it should work. If you are not the owner of that Fabric trial, then I think it will not let you access it because you need to have access to the data that supports it. In other news, we just released another major version to the theme generator, and I think we are now at full parity with everything you need to build inside a theme file. So we've been slowly adding more features to the theme generator. We've got this great color wheel. We have now this gradient builder. But in addition to that, now you can also add color classes and text classes per the Microsoft documentation now. So you can now change the root colors of your report. You can look at the status colors like good, bad, neutral. If you have a gradient that you're going to apply to your report, those colors come by default. But you can adjust those numbers, and then you can even adjust some of the foreground and background colors. These are all the colors like foreground light, foreground dark, neutral light, neutral dark. The documentation from Microsoft provides some insight to what these things are, but it's a little bit challenging to know what each color will do for each object. But we try to make it easy. There's actually a report you can render right alongside that. So if you're a Tips Plus subscriber, which we'd recommend you go get, you can log in, and not only can you see these values change in real time on some visuals, it'll make it easier for you to stylize your reports. Anyways, I want to let you know that that's out there for text classes and color classes. Both those can now be part of the theme generator tool.
Well, you're missing one of the biggest, probably bombshells out there with the tool, at least for me, is the ability to assign a color that's not part of the palette.
Oh, yes. So for subscribers, yeah. So if you, what we traditionally have done is every color you pick from the color picker is part of the colors you can use inside the theme generator. We just added, for subscribers, if you want to have your own theme color, custom for any property anywhere in the tool, you now have the ability to add whatever custom color you want. So we add that ability as well, and further enriching your experience, and then you can save your theme and come back to it later. I would also say, if you haven't played with it, you can now upload your own theme files. So a lot of people have said that was another major feature that was really needed. So now you can now upload your own theme files. We'll do a check on it and tell you if it's right or not, because we have the ability to do that now. So that's another major improvement that we've made additionally. So hopefully you like it. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate the input there.
I'm literally like going around and looking for old theme files to just upload, because I love that experience.
Yeah.
It's way easier to make stuff.
Right. Well, so the experience for people who don't know, when you upload a file, it automatically opens up the code generator, right? So it shows you the code in, and it validates whether or not the theme meets the new specs. And if it doesn't, it does a fantastic job of like, oh, the problem is on this row, and you just scroll down and
delete it, replace it, whatever you want. Boom, fixes it.
Yeah, it's slick.
Well,
so anyways,
if you
saves a lot of time.
If it's been a while since you and themes have had a rendezvous, your theme file is probably not going to work with the new one, just because this is dealing with the schema that's coming from Microsoft, the new schema.
And this will take any old schemas you have and immediately bring them up to current with whatever the spec is doing today. Right. So again, it'll show you where the errors are, and then you can go ahead and edit them. Plus, if you find a property somewhere in the theme generator that you want to know how it works or how to write it out, you can now click the code button anywhere you want in the tool, and it will illuminate the code for you and show you the code of what you just wrote or what feature is inside the theme file. So anyways, we think it's really good. It's very cheap to get going with tips plus. So we highly recommend you check it out. Let me know if you have any questions. Excellent. With that, let's jump into our main topic for today. Surprise, shocker, we're still talking about Fabric.
I just can't get enough.
Just can't get enough. I'm trying to work my way through what this Fabric thing means. So this time we're talking more about the Git integration, or now this new file type called pbip. There's now a Power BI project file that's appearing from Power BI Desktop. That was just recently turned on this month, this June, which was when the first feature appeared. And yeah, let's kind of jump into there. Let's talk about what is the pbip, and then what is the impact of that, the Power BI project file. How does it impact our workspaces now? How is this going to change our workflow potentially?
And I think that's a big part of today, because we had a previous episode. We already talked about Git. We talked about the implications of it, but there's obviously a lot more here. And I think especially for teams, how is this going to affect the process? Where are there going to be bottlenecks, regardless if there's a team who's well up to date with how Git works, but just really this entire new process flow, the new technology, like how is it going to impact teams, how easy is going to be to, in a sense, handle, and what does that grow up story look like?
This is something that I think us as developers have been waiting for a long time. So this is, I think every single project I've been on that has an enterprise or an IT team showing up to do Power BI, the very first question is, how do we control the content that we're producing? And I didn't realize this, but this is something else that I think that came out recently was, if you're a company that requires SOX compliance, so if you're going for SOX compliance in your organization, one of the questions is, how do you control your code? And so if you're using reporting in that lens, the question is, if you're doing app development, yeah, you're using a Git of some sort to control that code. There's a release process that you have developed, and that becomes part of your organization. But now if you're using reporting as part of your SOX compliance, you're trying to be SOX compliant for other things, this now applies to SOX compliance. Now, again, I'm not a SOX compliance expert. I've helped a couple companies kind of talk through and have some interviews with people who are trying to do a review for them, make sure they can get certified. But this seems to me like another blocker for the old world of doing Power BI. Well, where do you put your files? Well, we just put them on SharePoint. What's your review process to get a change to a report? How do we know the data is accurate, right? These are questions that, from a compliance standpoint, you kind of have in place.
Yeah, and with that compliance, right? Essentially, organizations need to invest in the people or teams, and that process being more rigorous than publish.
Yeah, publish from desktop. Yeah, we just go to desktop. We just download it and hit publish.
You guys ready? Publish. Or doing some checks and balances, right? Like, so it's for people that are not familiar. There's at least probably 4 to 5 additional steps, which are all review steps.
Yes.
Where teams or people or automated processes are checking, validating, and ensuring that whatever change, no matter how big or small, not only compiles and works the way we would expect it to, but also gets rigorous Q&A against like a set of, what is this new feature? Let's check all the old features just to make sure this new feature didn't break them,
yes,
et cetera. So this is why dev cycles take longer in general. Like if we're talking just, application development and whatnot, because you introduce these steps to ensure the quality of the product remains at a extremely high level, because not only with SOX compliance, but also within your organization, you probably have SLAs, whether that's for internal or external customers. But I could see definitely the use case here where you have external facing reporting, where you absolutely want to jump on this bandwagon, where you might have a little bit more wiggle room with the internal, but at the same time, using Git and this process is still a better solution than SharePoint was, because that was the only solution we had, right? You have version control in SharePoint files.
Yep.
It saved my life a few times.
But
It's still a good idea. It's definitely still a good idea.
Yeah, but the challenge with SharePoint, which I have recently had the displeasure of, it requires people to check things in.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can still work outside the bounds of things and make deployments to production areas and not update the file in the SharePoint.
Yep. And this is also where I think becomes very important as well. You need the ability, and this is where I think deployment pipelines come into play here, working with like a SharePoint type development. So, just to explain SharePoint, right? SharePoint is this landing place where you would put all the Power BI files.
Yeah.
Right. And if you want a secure way of being able to get something from developers into a production environment, it really makes sense to do dev, test, prod. It does make sense to have different workspaces for segmenting each of those bodies of work, because the data model has to be different potentially in 3 different areas as you test things and make sure that it's updated for production. Deployment pipelines are great, but not every customer is on Power BI Premium. And this to me, this is the rub. If I'm not on Power BI Premium, the process of getting things from dev to prod involves a lot more people. And because of that, there's a larger opportunity for errors in that space. And I've seen a lot of challenges where people publish things accidentally to test, or publish things accidentally into, I'll just make this one quick change in production. No. If you have access to production, that breaks the whole process. So I really do think you need to pull back and remove access to things that are in those production environments, because it's really intended for a viewing only consumption method where there's a very limited access to those final assets in production. It makes sense. You'd have the same thing when you build an app. Why would we think anything different when you build a report? I mean, literally, like a web app.
Literally like an app, like a report app, right? That's what we
said. I wasn't trying to say like a Power BI app, literally like a web app,
I know.
Something that you build on the internet. If you're building those things, you definitely want to have that tighter control.
This does raise some interesting points, at least from our conversation on Tuesday, about giving people access, but I think again also the restrictions on if you were to implement Git, which is only in a Fabric enabled workspace.
Whoa, time out.
Right.
I've done some testing on this, but keep going. It's not just Fabric, but keep going.
That's wonderful then. But if you were to enable this, then that process to follow, all of a sudden you're going from creating artifacts, and almost, not trying to break things, but from a very fluid way to now you're stuck in it is a much more rigid way of doing anything with Git. And you automatically put anyone in that workspace and those people now within this process flow, within this workflow that will take more time than previous.
Yes. Okay. So I want to go back to your comment there, Tommy, around this is it. So when I heard the feature of Microsoft the Git Pbip files and this whole, Git integration, initially my thought was the same thing as you, Tommy. I was like, oh, yay, it's there, but it's only going to be a Fabric related feature. So I have to turn on Fabric to get this. Right now, I've done some testing. It looks like it's available in everything that is premium. So every premium workspace right now, and this may be just available for preview. So, stay tuned. This feature may change over time, but you have the ability of then linking any Git to any premium workspace. And I think this is premium per user. I've tried it with Azure Premium. So any combination of those premium elements automatically get you the Git integration. And I would say, yay for that one.
I would be surprised if it wasn't available for a premium capacity.
Yes.
Yeah, that is okay. Cool. So it is available with PPUP, NF,
and A and EM. Alex, you need all the skills.
Alex is confirming in our chat that it is. Yeah. It is
anything premium. You can use it.
Not all artifacts.
Yes.
Right now, it's data sets reports.
But not finalized here.
Not finalized. I think people will throw a fit if they don't get this Git integration in a premium per user or a P SKU. Okay, P SKUs, you're paying enough money. Yeah, sure, you'll get it. No problem. Right. But premium per user, $20 per user. Yeah, I want it.
Not right.
Yeah, because for sure.
If you're using PPU,
I'll even use DevOps.
If you're using PPU, your end users have to be PPU, right? So you're covering the cost, I would say.
Correct.
I do want to draw back on one of Tommy's comments, though, that I think is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe pose it as a question, because when we talk about implementing Git, there is a quality versus time conversation that has to be evaluated within the organization. I think it's super easy for us to say, "Yep, enterprise," right? If you were managing the hodgepodge way we had to do things because we didn't have this,
yes,
it's a no-brainer to get onto the Git as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing about that is, I'd argue probably most of your BI team needs to learn how to use Git, because they're not going to be super familiar with it, because typically they're like especially in the last 5 years with a lot of Power BI focused people that have jumped into business intelligence, you weren't forced to use Visual Studio or be in an environment where you were checking in and checking out like PBIX files. So there could be a ramp up time there. But where do you guys draw that line related to, like, is this the same conversation we have around like how do you certify a report, right? From the standpoint, the volume of how much visibility it gets within the organization. Like, would you say you should always use Git no matter what, or any team, because of the management capabilities and the ability to like roll back to a different version? Like, how low into the business, or high, however you want to look at it. Like, how far into the business units do you go in terms of recommending that people apply this to their solutions?
Ooh, this is a great way of, you're talking about basically the Matthew Roach pyramid, right? They're like team level reporting, like personal
expertise level in here, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So I think there's a number of things. Your question is very well done, as always, Seth. It's always complex and so multifaceted, and it's like, this gem among the rough. So I think there's multiple areas to pick out insights from your question there, right? From my perspective, where does the value come from the Git integration? I think at a very high level, Git at a workspace level is immense. To me, that's a very big success there in general, because as soon as you turn a Git on, and actually I was going to say, I have created a Fabric workspace, the trial one. I have added all of my artifacts to there. Now, granted, every artifact is not being controlled by Git today, which that's a downside of the Git integration. But for the reports and the data set side of things, those are 100% being able to be controlled by Git, which gives me a lot more confidence when I edit the reports in the service. It gives me a lot more confidence when I edit the data set in the service, because as I make changes to that environment, whether it's less local on desktop, if I'm just adding a measure, or I now feel like I have a central place where I could then pull down the changes from that Git into my Power BI desktop file. And the process here is there's more process related to it. Or you just turn it on and let it run. So basically PowerBI.com just kind of tracks it for you, and you can make it so to that technical user, right? You can go very technical with it, like, hey, I'm going to do pruning, I'm going to pick reports, and we're going to promote things through, and we're going to have different branches. You can go like really technical on it, or you could stay very simple and just say, I'm just going to link this workspace to a Git, and all of our changes will be stuck in code somewhere, and we'll have full ability to revert back out of that code base.
Well, there's two, the word problem's not right, but there's kind of two concerns that come up when you say that. Once you enable Git, you kind of bring everyone down to that level, even the business users who are creating reports, right? Where do they have to know Git now if you enable this at a workspace level?
That's my point, though. If you're working on things locally on your machine, yeah, maybe, but you don't have to. It's not a requirement if you turn on the Git at the workspace level. You can still do all your normal process the way you were doing things: store files in SharePoint, bring them down, push them up to PowerBI.com. What will happen is the Git in PowerBI.com will automatically acknowledge you've uploaded something different and force you at the PowerBI.com level to check things in. So I think there's a very low barrier to using this by saying, I'm going to think about this in a very simplistic way of just saying, I'm going to link this workspace to Git. The other side of things is more complex, where we're saying you don't actually build Power BI files and check them out from SharePoint anymore. Instead, you're going to make a PBIP file, Git integrated file, and then you're going to check that in and out of Git all the time. So both sides of the pattern work here. You can go very simple, or you can go very complex. I think it works both ways.
Well, but if you enable Git on a workspace and you say, okay, now we're going to work with pbip, this no longer becomes that easy. Just download Power BI Desktop and start building.
Why not?
You need to install Git now.
No, you don't.
You have to make. Yeah, you do. So every time I publish a report or a data set, right, to the service, it converts it in the back into pbip, because I don't think version control works with pbix. So every time I'm publishing a pbix, right?
You would still so again, this is where I'm saying you don't have to have every user go full or into the pbip realm. If I have a workspace that's attached to, like, say I have a Fabric workspace, your destination, your source of truth of that file can now shift, is my opinion, right? The Git integration between that source control and that workspace, those two objects stay in sync. So all the artifacts that make up those files are now living there. You can also still download files directly from there. So if you go to a file or a report that was made inside your Power BI workspace, you can download the PBX file just like you normally would. It doesn't block you from downloading that file anymore.
So you're putting all these restrictions, because now it doesn't talk back. So if I'm a business user who's creating a PBIX and I publish, if there were to be a change that was made by the BI team, that does not then talk to the PBIX file in SharePoint. That requires the user to then download that report. And I have not tried that with a workspace enabled. I don't know if it does PBIX or a folder. So now, and they may not even know, because again, we've talked about business users being Git averse, so to speak. But if they're relying on SharePoint for their source of truth because they're not using Git, and there were a change to be made on in the project folder, how would they know? So this is what I mean. This you kind of bring everyone down to that level.
I mean, it's last one in, but I mean that is the expectation of that team, right? So if you're going to do that, so if you're going to use SharePoint as your storage for the files, the PBX files, right? Don't change your process. You don't have to do anything different. That becomes the story of truth. And the expectation is any changes that get made in the workspace or workspace level changes that have been integrated with that Git, all those will be overwritten. Like they're mutually exclusive. You cannot blend those two, but you have to have a process.
Right. Yes. And I think it would be helpful to kind of look at current teams' process, because I think kind of the crux of the conversation today is how is the team going to adapt, or in a sense migrate over to using source control? And I thought it'd be kind of a fun exercise to look at what is the current process for a team right now, pre-Git, what do you call it, BG, before Git. And then what would it be with Git fully enabled? And because we've talked about it, yes, it is very similar to an app, but we've also talked about the ability where to churn out reports, to be able to be flexible, dynamic, because we're not IT. Even though this is awfully, if it looks like IT and it's beginning to smell like IT, with source control.
Think like the business.
This is
like IT, Tom.
Yeah, it's our phrase.
A couple things I want to interject, because I like the direction we're going to go, right? Like how, like pitfalls, or like how does the team implement this? But we're instantly in the realm of, this team is going to implement it or wants to. I think one of the, if there is a conversion or clash between somebody taking a file that's already implemented in Git, downloading it as a PBIX, from my understanding, it's pretty easy to just change the file format. You can flip back and forth between PBIX, PBIP. So like that can be reinstated into your Git, and you can merge those changes in if you needed to. So like not a big deal from my understanding. Where I didn't hear a conclusion to my question is, I think there's going to be there are going to be teams that probably won't pick this up.
Yes.
Because publish is a whole lot easier than, hey, there's this new tool and there's this brand new process and all these things you have to now understand as a lay business person that uses Power BI. Right. And I think that cliff is kind of high
Yes.
in some teams that are utilizing Power BI, because you have to understand, remember, the spectrum of people who use Power BI, which is even more hilarious when you throw Fabric at them, is the barrier to entry is pretty low. Connect to an Excel file, automatically get some aggregations in DAX. What is DAX? I don't care. Like, I get value out of the tool.
Yep.
And it also leads me to believe that within here, there's probably some very business-centric training or like presentations that somebody could develop for the lay business user around what is the easiest and most simple way to implement Git because it's better than SharePoint. Like what is like, how do you lower the barrier of entry? Because for people who are not familiar with Git, it quickly goes into, oh, hey, we can do all this stuff, and they go, run away. So anyway, like, I just wanted to point that out, that it's like, to me, there's still this nuance of like introducing a very technical process into something that is by and large a managed business area for many Power BI reports, and how do we bring them along for the ride? So moving on, for teams that want to are in probably the most widely used implementation of Power BI, where you are using SharePoint as version control. Tommy, I think your question was, how do you go from that into this realm?
And I have a few scenarios, and think about the normal process today, and then how much changes with Git is how much of a better process it is, how much more time is it, and what other checks and balances are in place. So let's take the good old data set development, building a report from scratch, a data set from scratch, doing the sandbox phase with the stakeholder, just building the new data set. Think about that process today, how that's built, and all the variations you've seen of that. What does that look like in Git? And then how much more time and what process in there where this is more valuable?
So you asked another question. Which question are we addressing? Because Seth asked another question, and then you asked another question. So
what question did Seth ask?
Seth was going back to saying, I want to talk about the different levels of where does source control kind of impact the business. So I think I want to unpack that one a little bit more, and then I'm going to come back to your question, Tommy. So I want to pin that one. We'll put that, but then the parking lot will come back to it.
Parking lot, because that's still part of the.
I want to talk about your thing too, Quinn.
Pin it.
Yes. So I feel like there is now a progression occurring. So there's a couple threads here in the chat window talking about, where does Fabric fit, and how enterprise AR is talking some good questions here. I love your questions you're asking. I see Fabric is now adding to the role of Power BI some additional IT-based functions that we know we need, right? So I see there is two new personas or two new workloads we're bringing to Power BI. One is that data engineer, and then they're bringing this concept of a data scientist. So these are traditional tools that were pipelines, other data engineering exercises. So when we talked with Roach's maxim, right? Transform your data as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. What we've done is the transform data as far upstream as possible. We now brought that into the ecosystem of Power BI. So to me, I see this data analyst or report builder, data modeler, their role is blending much more closely with a data engineer. And I would fully expect a data engineer, whatever they're building, to be very versed in Git, GitHub, that kind of technology. So when we talk about, okay, we now have this world of, we have this tool that is Power BI that has been very business focused up until this point. We're now adding more IT-based roles into this, call it playground, that we're all working in together. Now I see there's a progression of how would I integrate Git in for different levels of people in that team. To your point, Seth, right? A business user, how do they integrate? Where does the value come from them? And at what level of engagement would I expect to see a business user play with this Git integration? Again, my first opinion here is keep your process. It's, you still work with your files. Your master file lives in Git somewhere. You can then use those files, create what you need to create, and you can publish it right to powerbi.com. But in doing that, the expectation is you're not going to make changes to reports in the workspace. You're not going to go edit things inside the workspace, because even if you did that today, right? If you edit a file in the workspace, you immediately become out of sync between what's going on in SharePoint and what's going on in the workspace. So it doesn't really matter what you do. Don't do it. So on the next challenge is, okay, so where do you use Git in that scenario? I feel like it would be relevant to have at least a copy of that development or that workspace inside Git already. So, linking the workspace to Git, keep your process the same. Every time you upload a file, you'll just be able to see a little red button that shows up that says, hey, look, something's new, synchronize it. And that way you at least get some tracking around all those items. The next level I see up in this one is using Git as an actual tool. And so now we're talking about checking in, checking out individual reports and using the pbip file. And you'll notice there's a couple, to me, there's the magic of what's happening here is there is the file type, and it's described actually in the blog about this one. There's a certain file here. There's a git nor file. So if you make a pbip file from desktop, you get a dataset folder and a report folder. And there's the git ignore folder or file that describes certain objects that it wants to ignore when you're talking about the Power BI file. So there's a couple things that PowerBI.com does not care about that's inside that file. One of them is local settings.json, so local settings of that file for your report. The cache, the ABF, and I think that's the key part here, right? So if we talk about the schema that defines the data set and the schema that defines the report definition and the data model definition are actually very small. They're not large in size. It's the ABF file that's very large. When you load your data, that's what makes the PBIX file huge. So all they've done is they basically said, I'm going to allow you to have an ABF file that is independent of the rest of the objects that describe a report. And so when that, to me, is the secret sauce to make all this work. Because as soon as you rip out that file, that one file, everything's easy to check in and out of Git. And so now you have to go into, okay, this team is very IT focused. We understand Git, or we have to do some training around it. When we get power users of Power BI, or we get experts coming from IT that are going to use Power BI, we push them towards more a full Git solution. Does that make sense? Or I just go on with like 3,000 bunny trails.
We had some fun.
I think the conversation for me is pushing this towards that. Yes, it's extremely valuable. The value, like even in the chat, we're going back and forth a little bit. The value is there. The prop is, how do you bring along as many people in the organization as possible, right? And
yes, I agree 100% with that.
Like the big teams, the BI teams, those,
yes, they're going to love this.
Heavy users,
yep.
all in right away, right?
Yes,
even if it is net new. There's a cusp here where I think this does become part of your adoption, or if you are a team that is training users how to use and implement Power BI within an organization, that the things that are widely shared should certainly become part of this, right? And develop the ease of use training of like bare minimum, right? Like, here's how we want to get people onto this platform without it being the scary new object. Mm-hmm. And my kind of side chat in that's going on right now is there is this level of like, this is an extremely valuable new feature that we can use. Mm-hmm. But in the same way, Power Query was in Excel for a very long time and extremely valuable to the business. And how many business users actually used it? Because it was a new thing they had to learn, right?
Yes.
So this is where we I think definitely like two thoughts came to my head. One is we definitely want to develop some training materials to like bring them along for the ride because of the value that this new feature encompasses.
Yes.
But at the same time, I hate this. The second point just went
right at your head.
All right, move on.
No worries.
But anyway, the implementation strategies, right? Of like bringing those users along for the ride.
I agree.
Definitely important.
And honestly, though, I know we're talking about a lot of the conversation is also some of the new users who may not have heard of Git. But honestly, though, think about the last 7-8 years of a BI team, a large BI team, or even small, the centralized team and their current processes. Does this, in a sense, have a solution for whatever those ailments were for their current processes, for managing content breaks, business logic changes, or just pure report development, right?
One thing I will say about Git slows everything down. Like,
right.
I will say it is a it's a process-driven, it's actually a proven method to be able to regularly put out quality content all the time. And the reason it's good like that is because it has these natural breakpoints to, I'm building this thing in a development branch. I've got I think I'm done. I need to go push it through, and then you can then kick off a process that automates deployment across other things. And to me, there's a hidden benefit here as well, is if we're thinking about dev, test, and production workspaces, how do we handle the migration of these changes through all these environments? You can use deployment pipelines, great. But if you don't have deployment pipelines, or you're not going to use them, the automation of being able to adjust or push changes into these individual environments, we've never had a method to auto deploy, other than deployment pipelines, auto deploy changes from one workspace to another.
Yeah,
you can't take, like, I want line 10 on this part of the file. I only added one new page. How can I push that one new page into a library that can then be modified or absorbed by other workspaces? So all I'll say is this: it's a time proven technology. It definitely slows you down, but it adds a lot of process and traceability to what that looks like.
And that's where an interesting push, I see is happening, right? More often than not, business has and does just run at the speed of light. Everything is a fire drill. You have to get these things turned around as quickly as possible. And when you interject something that will slow that down, that has to be an agreed upon thing. But at the same time, the volumes of data and how companies are interacting, like, I can't believe I missed my second point because I literally wrote it down. And it was kind of referenced by Enterprise AR in here, which is, our companies pushing what we would term business users, like just the Excel user, into being more technical.
Yes.
And I would say, yeah, progressively, Fabric is that. That was another comment in the chat.
Yep.
Can users just be Excel users anymore? I think we're moving in a direction where I don't think so, right? Like, the tools and capabilities are being brought down to a level where they're not stuck behind IT, and certainly offering a lot of opportunity for what you would term like general business users or information workers to become much more technical. And that should be very exciting to them, but it should also shift their thinking to the point where I can't just sit on my laurels and think Excel's going to get me through my career in the next 5 to 10 years. I have to level up my game. And the great thing about a tool set like Fabric is it's lowering that barrier of entry and exposing these people to a different and larger, better ways to manage their data.
Yeah.
And report on it, right? So ultimately, once again, we were light years ahead of Microsoft and everybody else. Like, Mike, think like the business, act like IT, right? Like,
there we go.
Like, we projected this, I guess, 5 years
long time ago. I mean, to your point there, like, this is why we came out with the version control Power App that did all this. It's literally the same process, except instead of lifting just the small pieces of the Power BI file, it lifts the entire PBIX file. So it's using SharePoint. It's version controlling inside there. It's using check-in, check-out to be able to lock or not lock files that you're using from SharePoint. That's the purpose. Like, we were trying to put some rigor around, here's where the source of information lives, here's where the definition of that file lives, and then methodically be able to apply a process to this one. So this goes to our conversation yesterday, or Tuesday, I guess, right? Talking about what is governance and administration of these processes. And so I think what happens now is we've been now given some new tooling that really helps us to then provide better governance around our tools, right? These are the guardrails by which we can say we play by. And I think, again, not all data is quite created equal. Not all content is created equal. We're going to have portions of our organization are going to have data that is very tightly regulated, and there are going to be other portions where we don't care. Build what you want to build, but we can't stand behind it. We can't put our stamp of approval on this stuff because this came out of a non-certified process.
So let me lean into that a bit, Mike, because I do agree. But as I'm thinking about this, using Git and using source control from a team level point of view only makes sense if the kind of the methodology and the principles change in terms of how we do report development. If we're simply trying to migrate the rapid development that we do now, and just use it in Git, I think that's we're missing the purpose of what Git allows us to do. The big part here being that source control, or the data governance side, the contract we have with the business to verify. Obviously, there are things that get slowed down, but the point of using this new tooling, not new platform, but using this platform in our space is the ability to verify, is the ability to ensure the information and the content that we have. So it's not just.
I mean, it's a part of that story, though. It's not full. It's not full stop.
But,
just turning on Git doesn't mean everything's verified.
No,
it means
no, because that's what I mean.
All right. So
what I'm saying is, if you just try to migrate your process with Git, you're missing the point.
Yes, but I'm saying I think we're walking into a space where a lot of organizations have zero process on how they get things from, my working on my computer into pbip.com. Like there's just literally just build something, publish it. And then someone comes back and says, oh, there's something wrong with this. Okay, I'll fix it. You fix it and you publish it again, right? That's kind of how the process works. Very loose, maybe not tight controls. And I think what this is going to force the business to do is start thinking more like IT, the latter part of our phrase, right? This is the portion that we really do want to have. And so it'll be up to us to define, okay, being people that span both very heavily into the IT space and very heavily into the business space. Okay, business, where do we need to bolster your knowledge so that you can act in a more process-based way? And I think another part here is that executive sponsor is going to be very important in this, because with this new feature, we have the ability to slow things down a lot. But if we don't communicate why the slowdown is happening, what's the added benefits of using this, and how to make sure people understand this is the right way, right? You got to keep thinking certified data sets here, right? Certified data sets 100% should be checked into Git, 100%. Certified data sets should have dev, test, prod, 100%. There should be a checking portion. There should be a team of people or a person who's going through and creating reports and then making sure they're right before they get into production.
Yeah, I think the sort of, like, if you're already in the certified data set realm, you probably already have some rigor around your process, right? I think
hopefully
where this is going to cause the most contention initially is interjecting the conversation of process.
Yes, I agree with that.
Business-focused units.
Yeah.
But and we've talked about this in our just process conversations, right? I, as a BI developer or a report author in a business unit that is just consumed by the fire hose of requests to dump out reports, we've talked about the importance of creating a process or an understanding with the business of, okay, related to work item management, right? Like how do you get a work item in? What is your estimate? What is your time for delivery, et cetera? Like, this also puts in the checks and balances of quality on top of that, because as long as it's agreed upon that it's like, hey, my development process and cycle takes us, this long, but the quality of this product is going to be much higher. Like, I can guarantee the quality of the product because it's going through this well-refined process that we create through this new feature. And that, I agree, would 100% have to be an agreed upon thing from management or top down, because at some point in time, someone's going to come through here and challenge that process. They're going to say, so-and-so needs this thing in like 2 days. You're like,
yes,
sorry,
they will.
But it takes us a day to run everything through our process. I mean, and that's an over exaggeration, but there's gonna be a give it to me now.
Yep.
Versus I'm sorry, that's not how we do things, and I can't. Right.
Yes.
Or if you want it and it's outside this process, then I'm not guaranteeing the work.
This is gonna
but the value there is also running things through checks and balances, running them through more standardized deployment means you have a better, more high quality product, and it catches a lot of mistakes that go out the door.
I agree.
But so that really goes into a question I was going to ask too. You did make a good point though, with all the caveats and scenarios here. It really is going to require the talent and the knowledge of Git stashing, staging, the conflict to be high, or you're going to run into a lot of situations. We'll
disagree on that statement. I don't think you need to know everything about it just to use the benefits of it. But I do think you would want to have people more. You're not going to use stashes. Right. I mean, you're just not.
Well, I'm seeing scenarios in my head of needing to push something out, but you're following a process. But anyways, you made a good point, because putting this into place and implementing this is not a independent act for the BI team, because of the change that it's going to do from a timing point of view, the additional steps. So would you agree or disagree with the statement? A BI team cannot independently launch Git or the source control without there being a conversation and agreed upon with the executive sponsor with their data governance program.
I would argue that so to answer your question, you would not want to release Git without a process in place.
Right.
So,
well, yes.
Right.
Yes.
That would come. So this is why the Center of Excellence exists, right? This is exactly why you need to have a Center of Excellence in your organization, right? The community practice is trying to build stuff in Power BI. Everyone's making things. They're just lifting, whatever they're doing, right? They're pulling SharePoint files, right? They've got files stored on their local machine, fine, right? They're publishing to service and they don't care, and they're always downloading from the service again to desktop, making changes and publishing back up. I mean, a lot of people I see in organizations, that's how they think this works, right? If I just publish it to PowerBI.com, that is my Git. That is the version of the file that I need. If I want to go edit it, I go download it, make my changes, and then push it back up. Okay, fine. I don't like that method, but with this Git integration, you can't just show up and be like, we're turning it on without any process. And so the Center of Excellence needs to be that body that documents, here's where this is appropriate. Here's when we turn on Git. Now, again, these are guidelines, guardrails. There may be a finance business unit who's very comfortable with using Git. And they may be like, yeah, let's turn on them. And they may turn on all their workspaces. I think I'm fine with that as a Center of Excellence. But I think there's a level of expectation that team would understand and own that's not a function of the central BI team. So the Center of Excellence needs to be clear about what are the benefits of this stuff, how are we going to use it, what is our process to get stuff from dev to prod, and then go back to the executive sponsor and say, here's what we're proposing. And then the executive sponsor says, yeah, is this worth our time? Because this is going to, by turning this on, you're spending real dollars and real money of people's time to slow things down. But you're adding more process and more rigor to the deployment pattern. So yeah, for sure, that's got to be an agreed upon something from the executive sponsor. Is that where you're going with that, Tommy?
Yeah, and just saying that you can't launch Git with a BI team, I think, without this being affected or at least part with data governance. But it's just something that's not siloed, even though it is a technology and it's maybe just with the BI team.
What does ChatGPT think?
Are we at time yet? Are you serious?
We're there, man.
Oh my gosh. I'm literally surprised. Oh my word. Holy cow, this went so fast. I literally thought we were 30 minutes into the session.
What does Bing Chat think about throwing Git into the organization?
Let me pull something up here. I have to burn a couple of minutes here, Seth, while I get the question in here.
Well, I think Alex Dupler makes an interesting counterpoint to some of the conversation, right? Like what I hear you guys saying is it makes sense to announce and train the features so that the wider body of the organization and more teams would start to utilize the feature and understand that it's there, versus Alex saying like, no, it doesn't matter, man. I turned it on in all my workspaces, and now he has visibility into what is going on, regardless of whether or not people are using Git to deploy things. Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting from a fact finding, like understanding what's going on before.
I like this point,
but
well, Alex,
overall,
you're acting like
I think those are two different things.
I want to point on Alex's point there. Like, Alex, you are the central IT. You are the center of excellence. You are IT showing up to that business, that workspace. So maybe this is I didn't think of it that way before. Just turn it on, let it happen, and then the business kind of keeps doing their work like they've always been doing. And now other people, like, it's now tracked all those artifacts. So if someone leaves, if that file disappears or whatever's happening, now you've got record of what happened there. So it's a better way for IT or the central team to understand what's going on. Might be a good idea.
It
cool.
Might
all right.
Be.
What was that?
It might be a good idea.
I don't know. I like that idea. I thought that would be good. I didn't think of it. Let me just say this: that comment kind of surprised me, because I wasn't thinking that method. I wasn't thinking, the business unit is doing things, and I, as the central team, is trying to support them. Right? Yeah. Hey, I need help with this report. It's not working right. Okay, send me your PBX files. Like my first statement. Well, now I don't have to. I just say, okay, let's make sure I have access to the workspace. Right. Okay, turn on Git. Boom, it works.
Myself.
And now I can just go get stuff that I need. I can go get the stuff that I want from there. Okay, I tried to ask a question to ChatGPT. So what does ChatGPT say about Git? I said, how would I use Git as a business user in my enterprise? And it goes through this whole long, well, you need to install it. You need to create a Git repository. You need to clone a repository. You need to make changes, commit your changes, push and pull, learn about branching and merging, then figure out how you do collaboration. Then you're going to jump into resolving conflicts. And then finally, you're going to need to figure out how to use version history by using your Git log or Git checkout. Ugh. So I asked the same question to Bing, very similar. I kind of liked Bing's answer a little bit more. It said, sure, I can help you with Git. There are a couple ways to use Git. You may want to start looking at GitHub Desktop, which is a good, I'd say that's a pretty good starting point for a business user. It's a UI that helps you figure out how to check things out. There's another program called SourceTree or GitKraken. It's a powerful, elegant tool for Windows and Mac. And I've used GitKraken before. It's kind of cool. You can manage multiple repositories, work with submodels, and you can resolve merge conflicts using GitKraken. I think it's a paid service, but also another really interesting recommendation there. Just as some of the options we provided you are available using Git, as a business user in your enterprise, you can find more information about Git and its benefits on these official websites, and kind of point you to like Git Enterprise. And so here's complete these developer platforms training around Git. So I thought those were pretty fair from a recommendation standpoint. Regardless, though, I think, Tommy, your point earlier, or maybe some Seth, we're going to have to spend more time educating. Like, this is a brand new world for a lot of new people who are not used to this pattern. We're going to have to figure out what this looks like to help them kind of get over this initial learning skill, right?
Get her done.
Get her done.
Yeah, train her up. All right, well, that we have burned through a perfectly good hour. We appreciate the conversation. The chat has been super lively. A lot of great discussion there. So thank you, chat, for discussing and making some comments there. We really appreciate you as well. Our only ask or request, if you like this conversation, if you thought this was relevant around talking about source control, how this is going to work, thinking about some of the details of the Pbip files that are now out in the ethos now, please share it with somebody else. Let somebody else know you found value from this conversation. Share it on LinkedIn, share it on your social medias, or if you go into the office, which I think very rarely happens these days, if you ever go into the office, talk to a coworker. Let them know you found this fun Explicit Measure podcast and you got some value from it. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere it's available, Apple, Spotify. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, helps us out a ton. Join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all the pbix.tips social media channels. And if you want a topic for us to talk about, go ahead and leave a mailbag topic or question at pbix.tips/the podcast.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next time.